Hello, I'm Gloria, a 36-year-old office worker trying to balance the demands of my personal and professional life. My husband, Matthew, and I recently celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary, and soon after our wedding, we became parents. Our daughter, the center of our world, will be turning 8 in a few weeks. While there have certainly been some challenging moments in our marriage, the joy our daughter brings into our lives has always been a bright spot, and overall, I'm happy with our family life. However, like any couple, there are areas of dissatisfaction, and for me, the biggest issue is finances. Matthew has a strong interest in his hobbies and tends to spend a significant portion of his income on them. It's not excessive, but it adds up, especially when we're managing household expenses. I've always asked that he contribute a minimum amount towards our essential costs, utilities, groceries, and such. Unfortunately, this contribution tends to be just the bare minimum, which means I'm left to make up the difference, juggling our finances to cover rent, school fees for our daughter, and saving for her future education. The constant financial balancing act is a major source of stress for me. On top of that, the division of household chores has always been an issue. Even though both of us work full-time, Matthew hardly helps out with any of the domestic tasks. I've expressed my frustration and asked for more support, but it's always the same story. He claims it would take him too long to do the work, offering that as an excuse to avoid it. As a result, I'm the one who ends up managing everything. When we had our daughter, Matthew was reluctant to get involved in her care. He was afraid of accidentally hurting her, which left me with most of the parenting duties. Over time, my frustration with him only grew. We've been together for 8 years now, and our daughter is approaching the challenges of puberty. I've often thought about how difficult it would be to divorce at this stage, and I've convinced myself that maybe all marriages go through phases of distance, and that no family is without its flaws. Still, recent events have made me rethink everything. One evening, my sister-in-law showed up at my door, looking upset and asking if she could stay with us for a while. "Gloria, I'm sorry, but I need to lay low for a bit," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "I've had a falling out with Ryan. Can I stay here for a while?" I was immediately concerned and asked, "What happened with Ryan?" She seemed evasive, trying to avoid the topic. My curiosity piqued. I waited for Matthew to come home. It was around 9 p.m., and after we got our daughter to bed, the three of us sat down to talk. "So, what's going on?" I asked. She finally admitted, "Ryan just snapped tonight. He said he wants a divorce." I was shocked. Ryan has always been the level-headed one in their relationship, so hearing that he'd suddenly demanded a divorce didn't make sense to me. "Why would Ryan get so upset?" I asked, still trying to make sense of it. "Why are you asking me?" she replied sharply, her voice tense. Something didn't feel right, and I wondered if there was more to the story. Could she have done something to trigger such a drastic reaction from him? "Why are you defending Ryan? Are you involved with him or something?" she shot at me, her voice laced with accusation. I quickly denied it, feeling my frustration rise. Matthew, always quick to jump in, laughed off her suggestion. "No way, she barely has time for anything outside of her responsibilities," he said, defending me. He pointed out how I always leave my phone out in the open, as if that proved my innocence. But despite Matthew's defense, I was still irritated. My life was a whirlwind of work, house chores, and taking care of our kids. I barely had time to check my phone, let alone engage in an affair. Confused and agitated, my sister-in-law insisted she had no idea why Ryan was upset. It seemed we would have to speak with him directly to figure out what was going on. Later that evening, Ryan came to our house. My sister-in-law, feeling too awkward to face him, chose to step out. When Ryan arrived, he immediately apologized for the chaos he had caused. "I'm really sorry for everything," he said, his tone sincere. It reinforced what I had always known about him. He was a calm, reasonable person. "Ryan, I don't understand," I pressed. "You've only been married for a year. Why would you suddenly ask for a divorce? There must be something serious going on." Ryan hesitated for a moment before revealing the source of his anger, a shocking betrayal. My sister-in-law had spent all of his savings, $110,000, without his consent. Both Matthew and I were taken aback by this revelation. "You saved $110,000, and she's burned through all of it in just 1 year? That's over $5,000 a month," I said, stunned by the amount of money disappearing so quickly. Ryan explained that he had been managing their finances carefully, ensuring that monthly expenses were covered. The $110,000, however, had been spent solely on personal luxuries and entertainment, non-essential purchases. "It's no wonder Ryan is upset. I would be too," I sympathized. It was hard not to empathize with his position. Dealing with someone who had such reckless spending habits was a challenge, especially when it undermined the stability of the relationship. But there was also a lingering discomfort. My own husband, like his sister, had a tendency to overspend, and I couldn't ignore the similarity. It felt like these habits were deeply ingrained in the family. I offered Ryan a suggestion: if she doesn't make any effort to repay that $110,000, you might want to seriously consider separating. At least you don't have kids to think about. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Then, much to my surprise, Matthew interjected, "I'll make sure my sister pays you back," he said confidently. I was caught off guard. How could he be so sure? Ryan, appreciating the offer, thanked him. "I'd really appreciate that, thank you." After Ryan left, I decided to keep an eye on how things would unfold. Shortly after, my sister-in-law returned home, and I immediately confronted her. "Ryan told me you spent all of his savings, $110,000, I said firmly. She immediately became defensive. "I used it for living expenses." I tried to explain that to him, but he just doesn't understand. But I remembered Ryan had specifically kept a separate account for everyday expenses, which she had ignored. Her response was sharp and dismissive. "You don't know anything, so just shut up." This wasn't unusual behavior for her. She often belittled me during our conversations. Her inability to acknowledge the severity of the situation or express any remorse was telling. It was becoming clearer that Ryan might be better off considering divorce. Her disregard for the financial mess she'd caused, and her unwillingness to take responsibility, painted a bleak picture for their future together. During our tense exchange, Ryan had mentioned that he might be able to forgive. I snapped back, my tone stern. "If you can't pay it back, then you shouldn't have been spending his money in the first place." My sister-in-law, sensing a glimmer of hope, turned to me with a sudden bright expression. "Relax, Gloria, no big deal, we've got money, right? You've got $220,000 saved up, so there's no need to worry," she said with a triumphant grin, as if she'd just found the perfect solution. I was taken aback. "What? Wait, how do you know about my savings, Matthew?" I asked, bewildered. I had never shared that amount with anyone, especially not my husband, and now she was acting like it was common knowledge. Matthew looked unfazed as he casually explained, "I found it when I went to your parents' house. It was in the second drawer of the closet in your room." "You went through my things without asking?" I shot back, my voice rising with a mix of disbelief and anger. "That's an invasion of privacy. Just because we're married doesn't mean you can snoop through my personal stuff." But Matthew wasn't fazed by my reaction. He pressed on, ignoring my outburst. "Your sister-in-law needs help. Why don't you just give us your savings to fix this?" I was stunned. "I'm not giving her my savings. That money is for our daughter's future, for her tuition. If you think $110,000 should be handed over just like that, then you figure out how to pay her back." With a cold, calculating expression, Matthew pulled divorce papers from a drawer, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment. "I've got everything ready," he said, his voice almost mechanical, "in case something like this ever happened." The audacity of it left me speechless, but I found my voice again. "You're trying to manipulate me," I said sharply, feeling the weight of his words sink in. "That's exactly what I've been wanting to say to you," I shot back, equally frustrated. With a finality that made my stomach churn, Matthew began filling out the divorce papers, his voice flat. "I'm serious, we can get a divorce whenever you want." My sister-in-law, still watching with an amused grin, leaned in and offered her support to Matthew. "I'll be one of your witnesses," she said, signing the form without hesitation. "You can either give me the $110,000, or we get a divorce," Matthew threatened, as if he thought he could force me into a corner. I was taken aback by their audacity. Their tactics were underhanded and cruel, but I wasn't about to show them how much they had shaken me. I decided to let the moment pass, feigning compliance, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. The next day, I decided to take control. I invited my in-laws and Ryan over to our house, hoping to put an end to the chaos. When they arrived, Matthew's confusion was palpable. "Ryan, what are you doing here? Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Before he could continue, his father spoke up, his tone stern. "Matthew, don't make this worse than it already is." His mother turned to me, her face filled with regret. "Gloria, I'm so sorry for my son and my daughter. Their behavior was foolish." Ryan added his own apology. "I owe you an apology as well, Gloria." Their apologies were a shock, but things quickly escalated when Matthew tried to push back. "Why are you two apologizing? Just keep quiet," he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. Ignoring him, his father continued, "We went through your room, Matthew, and found stacks of expensive bags and jewelry." His mother added, her voice thick with disbelief, "Ryan asked us to look into it, and it's clear you've been hiding purchases from us for years." The revelations hit like a bombshell, and the tension in the room thickened. Matthew's deceit was laid bare, and his mother, clearly shaken, concluded, "I can't stay married to you anymore." The situation had turned on its head. What had started as a confrontation over money now exposed Matthew's long-standing financial dishonesty, casting my earlier frustrations in an entirely new light. Just as the dust seemed to settle, my sister-in-law's false claims about using the $110,000 for living expenses were brought to light, and the situation took another turn. "I want the $110,000 repaid, and then we can talk about a divorce," Ryan said firmly, his voice unwavering. To everyone's astonishment, especially Matthew's, I had already taken decisive action. "Oh no, Matthew, you're not the only one with a divorce plan," Gloria already filled out the divorce papers, and I signed as a witness. We've already submitted them, my sister-in-law declared, her tone defiant. What? This is outrageous. I won't allow it, Matthew shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. You won't allow it? What do you mean? You were the one who threatened divorce and tried to force her to take responsibility for your sister's debts. You're despicable, I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Gloria is my wife, not your property. She wasn't born into your family, and you owe her respect, Ryan said firmly, stepping in to defend me. The strength of his words, combined with the support of my parents-in-law, left Matthew speechless. His shoulders sagged in shame, and my sister-in-law stood by quietly, clearly stunned by the turn of events. Thankfully, my parents-in-law stepped in and helped facilitate the divorce proceedings without further complications, providing a calm presence during a turbulent time. In an effort to make things right, my sister-in-law managed to sell off some of her luxury goods, raising about $45,000 to repay Ryan. The remaining $30,000 was covered by my parents-in-law, who took it upon themselves to ensure that my sister-in-law would repay the debt under their strict supervision. This arrangement not only held her accountable for her actions but also allowed Ryan and me to move forward, starting new chapters in our lives. After the divorce, my sister-in-law found herself in a difficult financial situation. She now works tirelessly, from morning until night, to pay off the considerable debt she had accumulated by mismanaging her former husband's savings. The long hours of hard work have left her little time for rest, and the weight of her financial burden